When? Andrew Lloyd Webber tweeted, no, when it reopens it will be the brilliant original. Then we find out the entire cast have been unceremoniously fired in the middle of a global pandemic. We see pictures of the chandelier out literally on the side of the pavement. A lot of questions are asked at this point. He allegedly called the cast backstage from his holiday in Mallorca and lambasted them for being terrible. This was so harsh and so unfair that the show went up half an hour late because several of the cast members allegedly threatened to walk from the production. I mean, I tried to tell you. Oh my god, hey. Welcome back to my Stager YouTube channel. If you are seeing my face for the first time, my name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. However, if you are a fan of Cinderella and like watching videos about it on YouTube, I suspect you may not be seeing my face for the first time because at this point, I have been talking about this show a lot. And it was never my intention when Cinderella was announced to just keep going on about it on YouTube, but there's just been so much to talk about. This show has had a really crazy ride from the beginning, and it all came to a very dramatic end over the bank holiday weekend when it was suddenly announced that the show would be closing unexpectedly in June. What followed this was a social media tsunami for various reasons that I will go into, among which were an awful lot of comments for me to talk about the closing and why it has been so turbulent and so unexpected and why it's even happening, and to shed some light on this entire crazed situation. So today I'm going to be letting you know why Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cinderella is suddenly closing in the West End and what all of this means. So the first thing you need to know here is that the show was approaching a cast change, and it seemed like most of the current cast was set to be leaving because we're now finding out that there were a lot of replacements coming in. And this isn't really a huge surprise because if you've watched my videos before, you may have heard me talking about the infamous story where Andrew Lloyd Webber read a negative review of the show written by an American critic for an American newspaper and called up the cast and berated them from his holiday home in mainland Europe. This, alongside a lot of other rumoured negative treatment of the cast backstage at the Gillian Lynne Theatre, is presumably why most of the cast are not keen to renew their contracts and stay in this show and this discernibly toxic workplace environment any longer than they need to. Which is why there were so many replacement cast members coming in. We know that Carrie was set to be leaving. We know that Ivano was set to be leaving. We know that Rebecca Traherne was set to be leaving, as well as a host of other ensemble members. In fact, not only were we approaching a cast change, but cast members had already gone for costume fittings on the Thursday of last week. Now, just to give you some perspective on that timeline, the closing was announced on Sunday, in the middle of a bank holiday weekend. And the reason that this has been so controversial is this closing announcement was so sudden that the cast were only given half an hour's notice of it happening before it appeared on social media, before the stage ran the exclusive that they had been given. The machinations of how this works in terms of working with a PR team and a marketing team and the producers is a very complicated and busy process that does not happen quickly. And so we know that the wheels had to have been in motion for this for quite a while, which is why it's at least auspicious that new cast members were in fittings as recently as Thursday and a closure was announced on Sunday. Nothing has suddenly happened to the show for this to be happening, so it's all quite odd. Carrie Hope Fletcher was not actually in the building at this performance, so she found out by other cast members telling her. The production company made discernibly no attempt to tell her themselves. Producers did not reach out to her. She found out via her fellow castmates who had just been told on the stage. And when I say the stage here, I mean the literal stage of the Gillian Lynne Theatre, not the newspaper, the stage. That's how the rest of us found out. And let us not forget as well that the closing of a show goes further than just the actors you are seeing on stage. This affects the crew members. This affects the front of house team. All of these people will be suddenly and unexpectedly out of a job from June. The exact date of the final performance is going to be the 12th of June, so they have just over a month to anticipate this. Emotionally, financially, however else. What's even worse than this is all of the new cast members, the likes of Summer Strallen, who was set to be playing the Queen, the likes of Luke Latchman, who was set to be playing the Prince, Daisy Twells was meant to be joining the ensemble, John Waite of the Great British Bake Off and more recently seen on Strictly Come Dancing was set to be playing Prince Charming. Chrissy Beamer, a recent graduate best known for playing the role of Timoon in Once on This Island with the British Theatre Academy while she was still training, was set to be making her West End debut playing Cinderella as a leading lady. This was going to be a huge, huge deal for her that has just disappeared. All of these people were not told. They found out via social media. You know, scrolling on their Twitter feeds and suddenly seeing that the job they thought they were going into for a year, that was going to change most of their careers, that was going to be this amazing opportunity for them, has disappeared. And they have not been personally told about it. Or their friends sent it to them on WhatsApp. It's just so completely devastating and such an awful, awful practice. And it's not the first time that this has happened. We saw the same thing happening over lockdown when reopenings kept being postponed. We saw this happen with the cast of The Book of Mormon, with the cast of Dear Evan Hansen. It has subsequently prompted an entire conversation with Actors Equity UK, the union for stage performers, about preventing this from happening in the future, about making a system where all the performers relevant to a show have to be notified about this before it is made public. There's been an awful lot of punditry about this on Twitter, a great many hot takes, and I think Alex Wood, the editor of What's on Stage, put it best when he said, if there was time to flag with ticket agents, make new closing date artwork, ask your publicists to prepare a press release, give a quote, decide it should be placed exclusively with the stage, and sent to them under embargo, then you probably had time to confirm all old and new teams were informed. That's casts, crew members, all the staff, the human beings for whom you are responsible. And responsibility, I think, is the key word here that has been completely neglected. So this is the drama that everyone is currently reacting to. This whole big deal where these cast members found out they were fired via social media. Summer Strallen subsequently went on Instagram Live to kind of process the whole thing, to explain that it was happening, and was quite candid in her thoughts. You know, having worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber previously on multiple shows, she was very forthcoming in saying that this was not okay, he should know better, and she was very appalled by this even happening. She was joined by what was supposed to be new cast member Daisy Twells to offer her perspective as a young performer, and the reality is that Cinderella was set to be employing an awful lot of early career performers for whom this would have been such a big deal that has disappeared instantly and without warning, and without proper notification. As a result of this, a protest has even been scheduled for earlier today. As I'm talking to you, it is Tuesday the 3rd of May, and this afternoon there was a protest outside the Gillian Lynne Theatre attended by around 60 people, and it's great to see people advocating for the rights of performers. Am I optimistic that this will actually change these practices? I'm not really sure. And the reason I say this is because while I think it's great everyone is trying to hold Andrew Lloyd Webber and his team and the other producers to account here and challenge them on this terrible, terrible behaviour, this is not new. Like I've been trying to tell you for some time, Andrew Lloyd Webber's priorities have never been for people. The entire time he was being celebrated and uplifted as this hero of lockdown, his interests were so transparently his own financial success and the reopening of his new musical. Had he not had Cinderella in development, he wouldn't have pushed nearly as hard for the reopening of theatres. We see that from how little he does to support other creatives in musical theatre in the UK. He enjoys this monopoly as being the only recognised household name when it comes to British musical theatre composers, which is why new musical theatre writers struggle so much and producers prioritise shows with scores by pop artists, which is a different conversation for another time. But not only has Lloyd Webber done a host of negative things in the past, he has done almost this exact thing before. In the 90s, Patti LuPone found out that she had been replaced by Glenn Close in Sunset Boulevard by reading about it in a gossip column. She had no notification that her contract was even going to be terminated, to the point that she successfully sued Andrew Lloyd Webber for this and used the money famously to pay for a swimming pool, which, by the way, is exactly the kind of behaviour that makes her a lasting gay icon. So no, I'm not surprised that this happened. I'm not even surprised the show is closing. While I can't see any reason that it should have to close, obviously I don't know how much it costs to run. The cast is larger than a lot of other West End shows. You know, the stage moves. I don't know how you even begin to pay for that. Is that like a monthly bill thing? Is that like electricity? Like, I know when I use more electricity, I'm going to pay more, but like, I don't have a spinning stage to think about. How much does that cost, do you think? But the ticket sales for upcoming performances of Cinderella seem as good as for other shows. And you certainly wouldn't want to close what has been a very popular family show right before the summer holidays. It's a very strange choice that we're going to explore a little bit more. Now, the timing of this could be considered reactionary to the Olivier Awards. Cinderella had a significant snub where it only received one nomination for Victoria Hamilton-Barrett for Best Supporting Actress in a Musical, which it did not win. Critically, it was not nominated for either Best New Musical or Best Original Score, despite being one of the few really original scores currently seen on a West End stage this year, or heard on a West End stage this year. You can't see scores. What am I talking about? And whether or not we think it deserved those nominations it was certainly a blow to the ego of Andrew Lloyd Webber, which is not to be underestimated. The ego of Andrew Lloyd Webber cannot even be housed in the Gillian Lynn Theatre. That's why he has to tannoy in from a different country. His ego literally can't fit in the UK unless it's on one of the few occasions that he's flying back to the country to help uphold terrible Tory legislation that further worsens the quality of life for the poorest in our country. Now, the Olivier Awards have never had as sizable impact on show closures as the Tonys. There is definitely fallout after a Tony Award season where you see shows that did not do well, that had been hoping to do well, will close in the following weeks. That's never really been as much of a tie-in with the Oliviers, but in many ways, Andrew Lloyd Webber is operating on this show not unlike an American producer. The whole shutdown of Cinderella for a brief period while Omicron was happening is something we only saw with this show and a bunch of other shows on Broadway. And his behaviour with regards to this show throughout its run has definitely been odd. You know, the man offered to go to jail so that Cinderella could reopen, and I'm not going to say that no show is worth going to jail for, but this one definitely wasn't. Now, in the press release announcing the show's closure, there was also a lot of talk about reworking every element of the show ahead of taking it to Broadway, which is not a great thing to put in a press release about the loss of work for so many creatives in the UK, to try and cushion that by saying, but at least I'm taking my show to Broadway, where presumably none of you will be hired. I hope that is a comfort to you that other people will be employed. And yet that doesn't necessitate an early closing in the UK. It's not a logistical question. It's not like they need to take specific set pieces over there because the set is not that specific. And this is not going to be for some time. A Broadway opening has not been announced. It's now being talked about for 2023. Whether we actually see that, I don't know. I am slightly skeptical just because of the questionable run that the show has had here, where it has been heavily criticised by at least one notable American theatre critic. Another opinion that's been offered is that the show might be closing because Andrew Lloyd Webber knew so many cast members were set to be leaving, and he found this embarrassing, or the other producers found this embarrassing and thought this would look bad for the show. I mean, shows have done full cast changes before and not cared. I don't think that anyone outside of the immediate theatre community would connect a lot of cast members leaving this kind of obvious exodus with anything negative happening on the show. I think the general ticket buying public wouldn't care so much about that. Was he worried about the impact of Carrie Hope Fletcher no longer being with the show? We know that she is a significant box office draw. The fact that they were going to be casting John Waite, who I was very excited to see on stage, but is stunt casting as far as stunt casting goes. You know, he is famous for having been on the Great British Bake Off and then Strictly Come Dancing. He is not a trained musical theatre performer. For the role of Prince Charming in this, I think he'd have been great. It is more of an aesthetic demand than anything else. And that, you know, that works. But it certainly seems to imply that they were trying to draw in more audiences. But again, their ticket sales didn't look bad, and they were about to enter some of the best ticket buying months of the year. For a show to close after a quiet January is one thing, but to close mid-June is a very strange choice. If you were asking my opinion, and by clicking on this video, I'm taking that all of you have, I think the entire thing is about Andrew Lloyd Webber's fragile and damaged ego. I think the negative press on Cinderella has been very difficult for him to stomach, especially because while he is so lauded and so uplifted and so well regarded outside of musical theatre circles as, oh yes, Andrew Lloyd Webber, he is synonymous with British musical theatre. He is thought the world of by the general public. But if you look at his recent success in terms of musicals that he has written himself, not musicals he has readapted or produced, such as the Oliver revival, such as the Sound of Music revival, such as the Wizard of Oz revival, if you look at his shows, his new shows, Stephen Ward, Love Never Dies, Cinderella, they have not been critically successful or financially successful. They have been controversial, embarrassing flops. And I think that more than anything else hit him very hard with this show. Maybe he watched my videos. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe all of this rests with me. I apologise to the cast and crew if I somehow close the show. I'm doing the am I the villain meme, aren't I? I don't think I am the villain. Maybe I am. But I do think this entire closure is a product of the man's inflated ego. I also think the choice to do it in the middle of a bank holiday weekend is a very deliberate one. It's not going to get talked about as much in the press because journalists are on holiday. The box office isn't going to be inundated with calls the next day for people transferring, refunding tickets because they're on holiday. It's in the middle of a 3-day lull of a weekend where you can push the news out and hope there isn't too much of a backlash. And yet, that is exactly what happened. So what happens now? Well, we know that the show is going to be reworked in some capacity, which I think is a great choice. There may be a good show in there somewhere. I think it needs heavy reworking, both in terms of the book, in terms of the lyric, elements of the score. The casting and the talent of the performers on stage was one thing I could never fault with this show. They were fantastic. This show didn't deserve the talent that its cast offered, which is what makes this all the more heartbreaking for them and the amazing new talents that were set to join this show, who I know would have been phenomenal. Potentially the show will attempt Broadway. I don't see it staging any kind of a UK return anytime soon, but stranger things have happened with this damn musical. It also means the Gillian Lynne Theatre will be vacant from mid-June onwards, and while Andrew Lloyd Webber may want to leave it dark as a sort of a solemn effigy to the musical that London didn't appreciate while it was here, there's also every chance that a new show will be going in. Its most recent resident was School of Rock, which is touring through the end of the summer. Is it likely to try and make a return after that? Would Andrew prefer to put one of his own shows back into this theatre to kind of cushion the blow of all of it? There's something about the Gillian Lynne Theatre that makes me think producers would be very happy to put a blockbuster play in there. It's had Warhorse as a resident before. I could see the current tour of Curious Incident going back to London via the Gillian Lynne Theatre. Its tour will be finishing in time. Likewise, the current tour of Animal Farm that has been receiving very good word of mouth. I could see that going to the Gillian Lynne Theatre as well. Producers are always very happy to stage that kind of a blockbuster play. They have a lot of faith in that, especially when the material is also a GCSE school text. It's good for families, it's good for young people, it's good for school groups. And yet we could see a musical in there as well. The new musical What's New Pussycat that recently premiered at the Birmingham Rep has been searching for a London home. In terms of the compatibility of the Gillian Lynne space, we could see shows coming in from the Sheffield Crucible or from the Chichester Festival Theatre, even from Regent's Park. I would love to see the most recent Regent's Park Open Air Theatre revival of Evita that was meant to be transferring to the Barbican. With the success of Anything Goes, that has now fallen through. I would love to see that production staged at the Gillian Lynne. Again, potentially another way to cushion the blow for Andrew Lloyd Webber, have another one of his shows go into his theatre. It would also be a really great space for Hadestown to come back to the West End. Warhorse has been there, which we know has a drum. Warhorse and Hadestown played on the same stage in the UK. They both played on the Olivier stage of the National Theatre, so there's that compatibility there. And one thing I do love about the Gillian Lynne Theatre is you have that whole facade on the side for an enormous show artwork. Can you imagine how beautiful Hadestown's artwork would look on the side of the Gillian Lynne Theatre? Not to dance on the graves of all of the performers and the crew on this show who are now out of work, but we do have to look to the future and hope that something will be able to fill this space, because there is nothing worse than a dark theatre in the West End. Keeping that theatre dark means no one is getting employed for the sake of potentially a fragile ego. I also have to be optimistic that this moment can become a flashpoint for equity, demanding and advocating for better representation for performers in these kinds of circumstances. That it is mandatory that performers have to be notified before social media with an advance amount of warning. Tobias Charles from the cast of Cinderella tweeted, "We need a 2-month notice period both ways, like Broadway. Our contracts allow for us to be treated poorly. That's what needs to change." And that is the responsibility of equity, to advocate for better contracts that don't allow performers to be taken advantage of financially, emotionally, inhumanely. On a more positive note, the best thing as an audience member is to go and support and uplift and celebrate the cast members of this show and the cast members who are going to go into this show in other, better projects. Go see Chrissy Beamer in Lift at the Southwark Playhouse. Go see whatever Summer Strallen is going to do next, because she is a mega talent and she will get cast in something. Go and see the performers in the current cast of Cinderella in their next projects that I hope they are able to go into very soon. Feel free to let me know all of your thoughts about this controversial topic down in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel for plenty more stagey content coming very soon, including all of the latest news, rumours, reviews of new West End shows, and everything else that you might want to see. Also, if you want to support me as a stagey content creator, head over to patreon.com/MickeyJoeTheatre, where you can gain access to a bunch of exclusive photo and video content. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!